Hello there, my name is Sam, and today I will show you how to host Sphinx documentation in an Azure Web App for containers with NGINX. So basically today we're going to generate static HTML files from our Pydoc or docstring, and we're going to take those files and host them on Azure with the help of an NGINX reverse proxy. So first of all, let's talk about the architecture. So on the below right, you can see a developer, and the developer of course writes code. His code should of course have Pydoc or at least a docstring type, and eventually it's pushed to the repository. In my case it's often DevOps. In this repository, once it is finally merged to like a development or main, your pipeline will eventually get triggered. Your code is tested, of course, and it will be built in maybe a wheel file, and eventually it's going for release, and in your release pipeline the code is of course pushed to whatever service you're using the code in. It can be something like Databricks for data engineering, it could be a function app if you're using some serverless functions, it could be anything. But we're also now going to release our documentation so that the absolute latest version that is running on a certain environment is also available in the Azure Web App. There's documentation. So the static HTML files we are going to persist them in an Azure storage account, very simple one, most basic one, and we're only going to use file shares, more on that later. Those file shares are then mounted on the web app, and it's a web app for Linux and for containers using Docker Compose. This web app is now running on the app service, that's also Linux of course, and we use a very simple kind of authentication from NGINX in a combination with some IP whitelisting with the user. If you're not familiar with Azure, this might be a lot to process, but I will take you through it, and even for the more advanced people you can just probably speed up the video. So why are we going to do this? Well, in our case it's very handy to have the latest version of documentation running somewhere. It's easy for not only developers. Developers often have of course their IDE where you can just check the static HTML files yourself. But what about Scrum Masters or product owners or anyone who might want to use your code or wants to read the definition of it? So everyone has easy access for it. It's also very easy to use. You will see that in a bit. And the cloud costs are super low. So this all combined is like 10 euros a month, which is very cheap because the productivity of a developer will definitely be higher once you have easy access to documentation. So I will go into the demo. I will provision everything by hand in Azure. Normally, please use an automated way of deployment like ARM templates, using Terraform, maybe Azure CLI, PowerShell, whatever. It's always handy to have a backup so if someone actually deletes all your services or something. And second of all, this is just a basic setup. You can tune it, you can add more security, you can add more authentication. You can do a whole lot with it, but I will just show you the basics for now, and let's get right into it. So we are now in our resource group. It's an empty resource group, and we will start to provision the resources that we need. Let's start with looking at what we need. We need a web app, we need an app service, and we need a storage account. So we will start by provisioning a storage account. So go to the top bar, click storage account or search for storage accounts, then it will pop up. Click on create. A wizard will pop up. Choose your subscription, your resource group, storage account name. Choose your region. For we are going to provision everything in West Europe. We take the standard performance with locally redundant storage because we don't need anything else for now. This is all good. We don't need, we are not going to provision the data lake, so we can skip that. We want it to be hot. So this is Azure files. We don't really need it because this will only enable us for really big files. And for now we'll just keep everything open and keep the rest standard as well. So not really anything too interesting here. We'll just provision our resource. Just running it's running now a final validation. We can click on create and it will now deploy. So we can, while that is deploying right now, we will go back to the resource group and we will click on create and we will search for a web app, or we can search for a web app here, or app services. Click on it, click on create, and we will select the same resource group again, Sphinx demo with some numbers. That's for the name. Click on, this is very important, click here on Docker container, say Linux as operating system, and we want it to be West Europe again. We do need a new app service plan since we did not create it. So if you already have an app service plan, which we don't, you can also select here an existing one. For the specification, we will just take a very simple B1. There's a little bit more features than the F1, which is, I think it's free. So we will take this one also as SSL, which is really handy. And it's only 13 USD a month if you run it all day. So we will choose that. It will automatically create one. Click on next. Now we have the Docker tab, and instead of a single container, we will use Docker Compose. And we will say we want it from the Docker Hub, since we are fetching a public NGINX resource. And we will select it right now. So I found my file. It took a little bit of searching, but I found it. It's here, Docker Compose.yaml. It's also available in a repository and blog post that I linked in the description below. So I will show it now in Visual Studio Code. It's very simple. It's a service. It's called Sphinx demo. It will always restart. It will map the 8080 port, which is default of the Azure Web App, to 80 in the container itself, and 80 is the default port of NGINX. We will have to give one environment variable to it, otherwise we cannot use the file system as a mount, a image of NGINX, and then we have two volumes where we're mapping, this is just a name, Sphinx documentation, to the user share NGINX HTML, which is basically the sample HTML directory, and the NGINX configuration is of course in etc/nginx. So go to monitoring. I don't think we'll enable that for now, so we will say no. We don't need tags for now. Click on create, and it's now initializing deployment, and I will be back once the app service is deployed as well. As you can see, our resources are finally provisioned, and now we will configure the rest. If we go back to the R structure, we now have the app service plan, the web app, and the storage account. And for the first part, now we are going to create two file shares. If you still know, this is our Docker Compose, and we are mounting something called Sphinx documentation and NGINX configuration. So we will make two file shares with that exact name. So for that you need to go into your storage account. In the left bar, go down to file shares, and then click on the plus, and then we will call it, let's see, Sphinx documentation. Transaction optimized is fine, and then use create. And the same thing we will do for the NGINX configuration. And now that's done. Because we want to mount it in our app service, we will now need to go to configuration into our app service. So resource group web app, and then to the configuration. And in the configuration, we want to go to path mappings and say, I want to create a new Azure storage mount. So we'll call it NGINX configuration. We will say basic. We will choose our storage account, choose Azure files, say NGINX configuration, and the mount path is this one. And then click on OK. Same with the other one. We will say Sphinx documentation, choose our storage account, Azure files, Sphinx documentation, and use the other path. And click OK. Click on Save on the top and click on Continue. So essentially we now mounted our Azure file share on top of in our Docker container. The reason why we do not use a default container is because you can only read from a mounted container and not write to it. But it's also really handy to also write to your NGINX directory, because we can, for example, write our access log and error log to the file share, which is easy because you can easily access it now through your storage account. So now we set up this and we go back to the architecture, and now we need to, of course, add our configuration files to the storage account, right? Because now we have this is set up, and the authentication, of course, that is from NGINX itself. So we will go into a Visual Studio Code, and I will show you the NGINX configuration. So very basic. Most important part is here. You can copy it from the repository in the description below. It will listen on the port 80, which is as a default, and it will make sure that it can read the index.html. Service name we don't need it for now, and the location is at the slash, so at the start of the URL. We will try to find our files. It will automatically go into the HTML folder and host that. It will include MIME types. I'm including this. This is basically that it understands all formats. When I deployed it before, it didn't work when I have not included this. And because we are mounting a folder directly in the NGINX directory, it will just remove all other files and only have the files that you actually put in the storage account, or that is later written to it. We do use authentication, a very basic auth, so a classic username password. You do it with give auth basic restricted content, and then give a user file, which is this one, htpasswd. I will show you how to generate username and password for that a little bit later. We have the access log. We will write it to etc/nginx and then access.log. And what the cool thing about it is because we mounted, of course, our NGINX configuration here, it will automatically write the files to the storage account. And for the static folder, we are doing out of because it contains our static CSS files, and it didn't work. If you don't have out of, you need to do a lot of other things to get it working. And since it's just a basic tutorial, I will show you how to do this first. So we have our configurations and everything, and now we need to upload it to the file share, the storage account. One recommendation, download Azure Storage Explorer. It is way better, it's faster. Otherwise you can only upload one file each time instead of like everything at once. So I definitely recommend downloading this. It's free and it's easy to use. I have it open right now. Just log in here, you can add your account, and then you can see your Azure subscription, and basically you can just see your storage account, file share, and you can see the two file shares that we created, the NGINX configuration and the Sphinx documentation. First we will upload data to our NGINX configuration. So what will we upload? we will update the NGINX configuration. So NGINX has its a new configuration. We will upload to MIME times because it will an empty folder, and we will upload an htpasswd since that is linked here. htpasswd is just an empty file. If you want to generate your own credentials, please use the following command: htpasswd, then dash nb, and then your username and password. So for me, it will be my username is Sam and my password is test123. It will give you a username with a password hash. You just place it in here, and now it's done. Now you have basic authentication set up. If you want to generate something else, so let's say Sam2-123, you can also just copy that and just place it on a new line, and it will automatically work. So a new line is a new user. Now we need to upload. First we want to upload these files, right? So we go into the Storage Explorer, we click on Upload, Upload Files, and now we will select my folder. I found my files, and now we will just select all these 3 files and click on Open, and we will just place it at the root. So now it's getting uploaded. So now we need to upload our Sphinx documentation. We've already uploaded our NGINX configuration, but now we need actual HTML files or documentation to actually host it. We need to host something, right? So in order to do that, we will go back into our sample project. I already written a blog on this, on how to actually generate from your Python doc, Pydoc, your doc string, basically how to generate Sphinx data. So I'll just execute the command here, make clean HTML. Please read the blog post, it means a lot to me. And it explains how to get this working. So now we have our HTML pages in build/HTML. That is in here. And if you go into the HTML folder, you can actually see all the data that we need. We don't need the doc trees, we only need the HTML folder. So in order to upload that, we go back to our storage account. We want to upload this folder, build HTML, and we want a whole folder of HTML. I selected files. You can also say upload folder, build HTML, and then we want the whole folder, right? So click on upload. So why we don't load the contents is because we, in the configuration file, which you can see here, not here, here, we actually host this. And because of it, we need to still have an HTML folder there, or in the actual file share. So I think it's already uploaded. Yes, so now we have a HTML folder with all the data, and we have our NGINX configuration. So now we're almost done. We're now back in the Azure portal, and we can actually see our new working code. So first of all, whenever you're done, just click on restart. Sometimes it just takes a while. I have no clue why that is, but it will take a while for it to get restarted. And if you click on browse or to copy the URL, I will go in incognito. I will go in there, and then you can see I get a pop-up with the username and password. Well, when I don't do anything or click on cancel, I will get the 401 authorization request because I'm not allowed to go into it. So now we will use the password that we created, so Sam test123. Click on sign in, and now we have our demo Sphinx project with our Sphinx documentation inside of it. You can add a lot of customization and anything you want. This is just a basic setup on how to actually do this. You can see, like, whenever you have a new release and you automatically persist all the data automatically in a file share, it's very handy because we've been using a file share. Whenever I now change the data in the storage account, it will automatically be refreshed on the URL, on the endpoint. So you don't have to do anything with the web app anymore. You can just remove all the files, insert your new HTML folder, and then you're good to go, and you can actually read your data. Because of the Azure Web App, we also have SSL included, which is very nice. You can see it's from Azure, so we don't have to do anything about that. And if you want to even make it more secure, you can go to networking, and you can go to access restriction, and you can add like different IPs, maybe integrate your web app in a virtual network of your company, so that everyone on your company network can go there. Or maybe do way more cool things and customization, which you can do with Sphinx. So that is it for now. Very basic tutorial. If you're interested in how I set up all the CI/CD and how to automatically get all your build and all your documentation inside the storage account, let me know. Then I'll create a video about that as well. For now, thank you for watching, and maybe till another time.